and welcome to the National Hour draft. I think you could call it a special here on Buckeye TV. Today we're joined by the National Hour hosts, of course, Jeff and Darius, and Bleacher Report writer and Buffalo Bills draft blog editor Dan Hope. Excited to have you in. Today we're going to be breaking down picks 1 through 10 in the NFL draft. We would do the subsequent 21 or over 200, but we don't have the hours. So, starting off, we're going to go with Houston Texans. They have the number 1 overall pick, of course. We'll start with Jeff. Jeff, who are you thinking that the Texans take?
I think they might go. They have to go defense to that extent. Well, words are fun right now, but still, I think Jadeveon Clowney, or my pick would be Khalil Mack. I think Khalil Mack, it's one of those, not a big surprise, but I can definitely see him going there. Had a big game against Ohio State, really broke out in all the draft charts after the pick 6 against Braxton Miller, and from there on out kept his draft stock upward. But I think having him, he's at least a top 5 pick, but I really think a reach, he's going to go number 1.
I mean, I think that's an interesting pick. Saying that they would go defense for sure, I don't know, because right now I'm looking at it from this point because they have Bill O'Brien coming in as the head coach. Obviously, you look at what he did from his claim to fame working with Tom Brady. He's a quarterback guy. Everyone pretty much knows that. So I kind of feel like he might want to go offense because Case Keenum, I don't think, is the answer. I don't think that's the guy that you want to build toward the future with. So I would not be surprised if he does go quarterback, and between Bortles and Manziel is probably where they would go if they do go quarterback. But I do have to kind of agree that Jadeveon Clowney is the best player available, and when you have the number 1 pick, it's so tough to not just take the best player available. So I think Jadeveon Clowney is going to end up being it. But, I mean, there has been a little bit of talk about Houston possibly trading out of it. I mean, that could happen. I don't know for sure, but if that does happen, that probably wouldn't surprise me. Houston take a step back and then get who they really want later in the first round.
First of all, thanks so much for having me, guys. Glad to be here talking draft with you guys. Personally, I think the pick's going to be Jadeveon Clowney. I think that he's the guy who the NFL sees as the number 1 overall pick right now. I agree with Darius, but I think their biggest need is for a quarterback, and I think that's what the Texans really need. But the vibe around the league seems to be that the teams just aren't seeing these quarterbacks as the type of guys who are going to go number 1 overall. My big question with the number 1 overall pick is, will the Texans actually be the one making the pick? I think the pick's going to be Clowney regardless of who selects there. But I do think the Texans might want to trade down from the pick. I think it goes all along with them needing a quarterback but not having a guy they like at number 1. Maybe they move down and look to get some more picks. The most logical team to move up, I think, would be the Atlanta Falcons. They're a team that, under GM Thomas Dimitroff, has shown a willingness to move up before. They really need that kind of pass rusher, playmaker on the edge. Clowney could give that to them. But I think one way or another, the pick I see is Clowney. If we're doing a mock draft here, we'll just stick with the Texans to keep things simple.
Yeah.
I think Clowney is probably going to be the guy.
I mean, Dan, I totally agree that you could have that happening where Atlanta moves up or someone else moves up to Houston's spot. But what would it take to get that number 1 pick away from Houston?
It's always hard to tell because if you look at precedent, it would probably be at least 3 first-round picks. But it all depends on how much the Texans want to get rid of a pick and how much demand there is to get it. Because if the Texans want to get rid of it badly enough, they might take a lower offer than what you'd expect. So I would say most likely we're talking probably a first, a second, and a 2015 first. I don't think they're going to move away from a player like Clowney unless they really get something to show for it. I think they want to move down, but maybe not that badly that they're going to just sell it for a low price. But I think it could be had. I think that as we start to get into this rookie scale where you have a defined salary and by moving down you're paying guys a defined lower price, I think teams are a little more looking to move down than move up, especially in a deep draft like this year. But it's still a steep price, and I'm not sure anyone's going to be willing to pay it.
Well, speaking of trades, up next is the St. Louis Rams. Now, I don't know if they've said it publicly, but a lot of rumors have said that they want to trade their second pick, move down in the draft. I don't know how far, but what do you see happening there? I think that they would trade potentially with maybe a Tampa Bay. They want a wide receiver. Tampa Bay, actually both teams do, but for different purposes. I think that Tampa Bay might want to move up and take that Sammy Watkins to put inside of Vincent Jackson, who they have playing on the outside.
I think the big reason people are talking trades for Rams is because of how they got the number 2 pick that they have. They got this pick because they traded the number 2 overall pick 2 years ago to the Washington Redskins, got 3 first-round picks and a second in return for that pick. Now, I don't think anyone's going to give that to get there this year, and I think a lot of it's going to be dictated by the number 1 pick, because I think the top trade-up target is absolutely Jadeveon Clowney. If Clowney goes off the board 1, the value of that number 2 pick immediately decreases. And if the Texans are trying to sell the pick, then the Rams, what they're able to get for that pick is going to be less than what the Texans would be able to get. So I think it ultimately comes down to, again, do the Texans make that pick? And is there somebody like a Sammy Watkins, like a Khalil Mack, that somebody wants to move up high enough to get? I'm not convinced that there is. I think that Watkins is a hot name right now, but I'm just not sure he's a guy that someone should be selling the farm to move up to number 2 for. Maybe the Buccaneers, maybe the Lions, but I think it's more likely the Rams end up getting stuck at the number 2 pick unless they really take a lower offer. If they do stay, been some rumors they might look at Sammy Watkins. I would go with Jake Matthews. I think that's the guy who they could really use to solidify their offensive line. Not only would it give them a starting right tackle right away, it would solidify their guard position because they can move Roger Saffold and Joseph Barksdale inside. And you have insurance at left tackle because with Jake Long having torn his ACL in December, there's a chance he might not be ready for the start of the season. Matthew's a guy with 4 years of starting experience that you could plug in right away and feel pretty good about.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to, as opposed to, us talking about not just the 1 and 2 picks being traded, but also who it is that's making the trade. Because you look at Houston, they're not that far off. They still have tons of talent. They just had a bad year where they had injuries, they had bad quarterback play, a lot of different things made them have a bad year. You look at St. Louis, they're probably a little bit further away. So, they probably do want to go after 2, 3 guys that are quality guys as opposed to just going after 1 guy who's supposed to turn them around. So I can definitely see St. Louis trading their pick. If they do hold on to the pick, I do think that going offensive line would definitely help out what they want to do. They look like a team right now that wants to work around Zach Stacy. They like Bradford and they like what they have with the receivers, but I just think that running the ball is going to probably be the way they want to go, shoring up the offensive line. The defense looks like it can be a good defense, but, it's still kind of early to tell because all around they're just a young team. They're not there yet. So St. Louis could really go either way. I think that could be a team that trades out of it, but what are you thinking over there, Jeff?
I think it's going to be on the offensive line. I think offensive tackle, Greg Robinson out of Auburn, I think that's the go-to. I think also at the same time, as you said, Dan, Matthews is also a good pick. I think offensive line, if they're going to run the ball, they're going to need someone up front to open up the holes for some running lanes to happen. And I think going offensive line with Robinson or Matthews or whoever, that's what you got to go with that with the number 2 pick.
Okay, coming up next, you have the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, this is a team that they're probably the most likely team to pick a quarterback first. Houston may do it, but I think everybody's money's on Jacksonville. I have Blake Bortles. He's a Florida guy. He's been dependable the last 2 years at UCF. What do you guys think?
I'm going to agree with you there, and I think this is a pick where it could go quarterback, and I think the pick's going to ultimately come down to, do they think there's a quarterback worthy of number 3? I think the best pick would be Teddy Bridgewater. He's the most NFL-ready quarterback in this year's class. He's a guy who maybe doesn't have the physical tools Bortles does, but he's got the mechanics, he's got the footwork, he's got the decision-making, he's got the accuracy. You should be feeling confident that you can start him week 1, and that's what the Jaguars need because their best quarterback is Chad Henne. They're not going to get out of the basement of the NFL with Chad Henne as their quarterback. But there's still a lot of question about whether anyone thinks any of these quarterbacks are worth it. If they don't go a quarterback, my money would be on Khalil Mack of Buffalo. I think Mack's a guy who's really moving up the board and a guy they could view in that Leo spot, really that edge rusher, a guy with a ton of versatility. You can play him at defensive end. You can play him at linebacker. I think it's going to be either Bridgewater or Mack.
I agree that they could be looking at quarterback. Obviously they had the Blaine Gabbert experiment, and that did not go so well. I just think that for a different reason they're going to go quarterback. They want excitement in Jacksonville. They want people to come to games because at this point they're streaming fantasy stats on their replay board during the game. That's what people are going to the games for. People aren't going to watch the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I think they want to get something exciting, and I think if you're looking for exciting, there is no further to look than Johnny Manziel. I think when you start talking about Jacksonville is where you get into Manziel range, where maybe his talent, maybe his skill set isn't quite there. But if you're just talking about pure excitement, Manziel's going to bring that. So I think that for that reason, Jacksonville could be looking at Manziel. But if they're really thinking for building toward the future, Bortles is probably where they would go. But, I mean, I'm thinking either way, they're probably going to go quarterback. I mean, I agree with you that Bridgewater is probably the best guy coming out of this draft, and he hasn't gotten as much love as Bortles because of Bortles' size and as Manziel because of the amazing things he did on the field in the SEC. But I do think that that's probably where they're going to go quarterback with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
This is where I think Clowney's going to go. I think not the one pick, but I think if he's still on the board, I think this is where he's going to go. The 3 pick, I think, with Khalil Mack, as you said, Dan, going there. I think wherever Mack and Clowney, it's going to be the same range. I think in this instance, they just flip-flop their position. I think for Jacksonville, they have Henney, but I think they've learned from the Gabbard experience. If you take one of the top quarterbacks, it may not always pan out to be the best thing ever in the first round. So maybe they may go quarterback 3rd or 4th round, maybe set them up for 1 or 2 years behind Henney, let them learn the system. But I think right now, Clowney, number 3 to Jacksonville, that's his landing spot.
Okay. Up next, we have the Ohio team, the Cleveland Browns, the subject of the Kevin Costner movie Draft Day. And a lot of people have talked about them with a quarterback. They could go potentially a wideout if maybe Watkins is there. What do you guys think? Personally, I think they're going Khalil Mack. I think Mike Pettine's style of defense is very aggressive pass rushing. Also, cold weather. Khalil Mack is from my hometown of Buffalo, so obviously he knows a thing or two about that. And I think he would do very well there.
Yeah, you also know a thing or two about Mike Pettin, working with the Buffalo Bills. So, I mean, I think that's a solid pick. I just think that Watkins, if he's on the board at 4, you can't pass him up. He's the best receiver, in my opinion, coming out this year. So I just think, even though this is a year where Dan has said many times, and I do agree, there are a lot of good receivers. So you don't want to necessarily throw yourself at a receiver that you might end up getting later in the draft. But I like Watkins more ahead of the quarterback or ahead of the rest of the receivers than any quarterback ahead of the rest of the quarterbacks. So I think that the Browns right now are kind of looking to go receiver-quarterback combo. Maybe not in that order, but I think that they do want to get a quarterback and a receiver in their first 2 to 3 picks. So I think that if you go Watkins, then you can wait to the end of the first round, get a quarterback, see if one of the top 3 guys are there, or you could even wait later in the draft. I personally like Aaron Murray, Zach Mettenberger a lot if they're waiting to the 3rd or 4th round. Those could be guys, they could be absolute steals in the middle of the draft. So I think that's where the Browns could end up going. If you go with Sammy Watkins and put him aside from Josh Gordon, you could have any one of us out there playing quarterback because that's going to be easy to hit those targets.
Yeah, this is one pick that I haven't really changed my projection on since January, and I'm sticking with Johnny Manziel here for the Browns. I think, for the same reasons you talked about with Jacksonville, Cleveland's a team that needs some excitement. This is a team, everybody's seen the infamous quarterback jersey with the 20 names on it. This team has not had a good quarterback since they've come back into the league. Now, there's no guarantee that Manziel is going to be either. He's a very risky pick, but there's a playmaking ability there, something special there that he's going to bring a flair to the field. No matter how successful he is, he's going to make defenses game plan for his ability.
It's going to be exciting.
Yeah. So I think that's a guy, I think he fits what Mike Pettine and what Kyle Shanahan are going to try to do in Cleveland. I also think if the Jaguars pass upon Bridgewater, that he's another guy who would be in play there for Cleveland at 4. But also, like you said, and like we said before, these teams aren't loving the quarterbacks. Cleveland's another team, especially with that pick number 26. A lot of people think they're going to look and try to get one of these quarterbacks at 26 because most likely, whether it's Bridgewater or Manziel or Blake Bortles or even Fresno State's Derek Carr, one of those guys is going to be available at 26. The Browns might decide to wait until 26 to pick that quarterback. In that case, I think you are looking at a receiver. Sammy Watkins, certainly a possibility, but don't rule out Texas A&M's Mike Evans. There are some teams out there who think Evans is the better receiver. I personally agree with them. I think that he's a guy, he's going to create mismatches. He's 6'5", and he's a terrific athlete for his size. I don't think you could really go wrong with either of those guys. Like you said, you put either of them opposite Josh Gordon. That's 2 receivers teams aren't going to be able to cover very well. So I think it's all, do you focus on building the weapons around your quarterback first, or do you focus on getting that quarterback and building around him later?
I think, you said it, Darius, I think it's going to be a wide receiver, quarterbacks kind of thing for Cleveland. I think Sammy Watkins right now, if you want, with Gordon on one side and Watkins on the other, that's going to be really hard to defend. And with the quarterbacks, if you have they have another pick late in the first round, even second or third round, there's going to be a quarterback there that you can actually groom and get ready for the NFL. But if you have those kind of weapons on offense, you can wait a little bit to get the quarterback. But as long as you have that receiving core there, you become very dangerous down the line.
Certainly. Now, up next we have the Oakland Raiders. For my pick, I would say they go Greg Robinson, offensive tackle out of Auburn. I think they go BPA here, best player available. And on top of that, they have an anemic line as it is, and they're built on the running game with Maurice Jones-Drew, Jonathan Stewart, and Darren McFadden. Also add to that Matt Schaub. I think Robinson could really help this offense. What do you guys think?
I think we're talking a lot of the same guys that we've been talking about. This to me is where I think Sammy Watkins' landing spot is. We saw them make a play for Deshaun Jackson, came up short. That shows you they're looking for that number one wide receiver. Their receivers aren't as bad as people think, but they don't have that number one guy. Watkins can immediately add a speed, a dimension that they just don't have in their offense. So I think that's his landing spot. Other two guys, I think Khalil Mack, if he's still there, is a guy they'd have a tough time passing up. Or a quarterback, I think Teddy Bridgewater, Blake Bortles, Johnny Manziel, all guys who they could consider there at 5.
I think for me right now, I think it's going to be Jake Matthews, A&M. I think if you have that kind of running game, try to lean on it a little bit more, build the offensive line up, so have some running lanes. But I really think Jake Matthews, if he's the best available, as you said, Franz, I think Oakland, they need a lot of pieces to get going. I think you got to start somewhere. I think you go offensive line, then work your way out because it makes life easier on the quarterback and even for the receiving core. But I think start rebuilding Jake Matthews, and you work from there for the next subsequent years in the draft.
Yeah, I do think that right now Oakland has a lot of needs. Offensive line is probably their most glaring need because while Matt Schaub is not the future, he can at least be a good patch for the next couple of years so that the Raiders can wait and they can get a quarterback later in the draft. So they don't necessarily have to jump out right now. If there was no Matt Schaub in the equation, I would think this is where Bridgewater would end up going. I do think also that they need to look at their defense. So offensive line or defense, if Khalil Mack is there, for sure, I think that would be a good pick. I think offensive line right now, though, is just a bit more of a glaring need. So I'm thinking that either of the guys that we've been talking about could be the ones to go right here as well. But, there's probably going to be a situation where they just go best player available because they do have a good number of needs.
I would interject real quick. I think for Raiders, either Robinson or Matthews would make sense, absolutely, because like you guys said, we're talking BPA. Both those guys are top 5 talents in this draft. Most people would agree with that. So you really can't go wrong with them. I do think, though, if you look at, they've signed Donald Penn this offseason, they've signed Austin Howard, and they drafted Menelik Watson last year. I think those signings tell you that they're probably going to look in another direction at 5. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just think that they're probably going to look to address another area at 5.
Okay. Up next is the Atlanta Falcons. Now, this is a team where their offensive line killed them last year. They have all the skill players down, but it's the offensive line that killed them. However, I don't think that that's where they go. Every year, you have that one pick where you say, what? It was Bruce Irvin. It's been Tyson Jackson. This year, I think it's going to be Aaron Donald, defensive tackle out of Pittsburgh. If you look at their defensive line, it is just filled with a bunch of relics. You got Osi Umenyiora, Justin Babineau. So I think that they could add some youth, some athleticism. And Aaron Donald's, he's a heck of a defensive tackle. He had, 11 sacks last year, which is a lot for that position. Yeah. So I think you can go there.
I agree with you that it'll be offensive or defensive line, I believe. I agree with you that Aaron Donald could go top 10. I don't think it's going to be here. I think that they did sign a couple defensive tackles, kind of bulked up that interior line. They got Tyson Jackson and Paul Soliai. So if they're going to go defense, I think they're looking at the edge. I think we talked about they could trade up to number 1. If they don't trade up, or number 2, but if they don't trade up, I think ideally they'd love for Clowney or Mack to fall, but I think that's why they might trade up because I don't think either one will be there. If not, you probably are going to either have Matthews or Robinson on the board. I think one of those two guys would make a lot of sense. Solidify that right tackle spot, maybe an eventual successor at left tackle.
I think for me, we see like another offensive line person go. I think Taylor Lewan. I know he's projected mid-first round, but if you look at if Robinson or Matthews are gone, Lewan's one of the next top people up there. Now I understand if Mack or Clowney or somehow they get that pick, take that pick. But I think right now, offensive line, as you said, that's been a big problem last season. I think get Taylor Lewan, you start building the patches there, the front line, and to be back in Atlanta can be the old Falcons where they can be in the playoffs, guaranteed by like week 14 or 15. There's still 2 or 3 games left in the season.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta is kind of backwards right now. They're really built from the outside in, so they need to shore up both of their lines. So I do think that if they go offensive or defensive line, it would be an improvement either way. I do think, though, that if any team wants to go all in to try to get Jadeveon Clowney, it would probably be the Atlanta Falcons. That if any team is going to sell their soul to move up, you would probably want it to be this team because they were just terrible against the pass. They couldn't really stop the run either last year. I mean, their defense was just egregiously bad, and they couldn't protect Matt Ryan toward the end of the year either. So, I mean, a lot of it came down to the fact that they had guys like Julio Jones going down with injury. Roddy White was never right until the end of the year. That had a big impact, too, because if those guys were healthy, it would have covered up a lot of the issues that they had elsewhere. But the fact is they could not move the ball on the ground. They couldn't stop guys defensively, and their defense is really bad in the middle. So I do think whether it's defensive line, interior, or pass rusher, that's where they would look on defense, and then offensive line would just be a safe choice there as well. So Taylor Lewan, if he's available, or whether it's Robinson, one of those guys I think would be a good pick.
I think the one thing you have to look at, Taylor Lewan, he's a heck of a talent. It's just a personality issue with him.
Yep.
He could be taken top 10. He could fall to the bottom of the first round if a team doesn't feel comfortable dealing with him. He's had some criminal activity in the past, and in light of the whole Richie Incognito scandal, I don't know if teams are willing to if the juice is worth the squeeze.
Well, I mean, you look at the Miami Dolphins, you look at what the Philadelphia Eagles did to Deshaun Jackson. If there are any questions about character right now, teams are not playing around. There's not going to be teams that are looking at a guy with character issues and say, you know what, we'll take a flyer on him, because they don't want to play with the risk right now. So if they do think Lewan, any of the teams in the top 10, if they do think Lewan is going to be a risk because of his off-the-field issues, then yeah, he would end up falling. But I don't think right now, I haven't heard anything of it being teams aren't going to take him anywhere in the first round, because he's still a first-round talent.
Yeah, I think it's. I've heard a lot of different things on him. I think it's definitely possible he could fall, but I've also had people tell me that NFL teams don't see it as that big a deal. I mean, personally, all I can really say on it is that I don't think there's a single player in the first round who's got more important interviews and background checks than Taylor Lewan. I think that's a guy who you're not going to draft him without doing all your homework on him. But if he checks out, very possible he could go this high. I mean, you look at his physical tools. You just don't find a 6'7" offensive tackle running a 4.8 40 who can also drive people off the line. Those guys just don't come around every year. So it's very possible that he could, if you take Matthews and Robinson off the board and the Falcons like him, it's possible. Though it is worth noting, the Falcons are known for their quote-unquote comrade filter. They are one of the strictest teams about not drafting guys of character concerns.
Oh, yeah.
Might take Lewan off their board.
Okay. Up next at number 7 is Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is, I don't want to say it's a consensus that they're going to take a wide receiver, but especially with the trading of Mike Williams, who they may have, who, again, character issues.
Right.
They need someone opposite Vincent Jackson. They could go slot for that matter. I'm not saying it'd be outside, but I think it's going to be, I think they're going to trade, and it's going to end up being Mike Evans, but.
Yeah, I mean, I just know, like, from watching the Bucs play a few games, they're bad in a couple of different areas. I mean, obviously receiver, losing Mike Williams is really bad for them. And right now, Vincent Jackson is, like, their only playmaker on that side of the ball on the outside. So they really do need another guy to be out there to make plays. They like Mike Glennon, so I do think they want to build around him, and they're going to see what they get out of the McCown experience this year, because, I mean, Josh McCown was great, but, I mean, in only a limited amount of time. So we'll see what they get out of that. But overall, I think receiver could be a good pick for them, but I'm not entirely sold on them not taking Khalil Mack if he's available, because Khalil Mack was a guy who was projected to them early on in the process before anything else was really going on. It was either him or Barr because the Bucs have been talking about linebacker. That's another one of their needs right now as well. I mean, especially a guy like Mack who's so versatile. He can play inside, he can play outside, he can play a little bit of coverage, and he's really good at coming off the edge as well. I mean, if Khalil Mack is there, it's going to be tough to pass up on him because this draft is pretty receiver deep. So the Bucs could afford to wait for another playmaker on offense. I do think if the guy like a Khalil Mack is available, you cannot pass up on him if you're Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very valid. I think Khalil Mack is a top talent who I don't think is going to be there, but I think if he is, they strongly have to consider it. But I do think this is where Mike Evans is going to land. I think that, you look at this team, who's their number 2 receiver? Eric Page? I mean, this is not – they absolutely have a need at this position. And I think some people might think Mike Evans isn't the right fit because he's actually been compared to Vincent Jackson more than anybody else. But if you look at this team's history, Lovie Smith comes from the Bears. Josh McCown comes from the Bears. They both worked with Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey, which is a two big receiver tandem where you've got 2 big guys, not the fastest guys out there, but they can go up and get the ball, and that creates mismatches because, like I was saying before the show, unless you're the Seattle Seahawks, you don't have 2 corners who can cover 6'5" receivers. So it makes it tough on a defense, and Mike Evans is a playmaker. I mean, it's a guy who you throw the ball up to him, he's going to go up and get it, and I think that's the guy. I mean, Watkins would be an ideal pick for them as a complement to Jackson, but I don't think he's going to be there. I think that's probably right about where Evans lands.
Well, to add on to that, I mean, Glennon has a rocket of an arm. So if there's anybody who you would want to have at a receiver to tell just go deep and he'll hit you, it would be a guy like a Mike Evans because he can play the jump ball game as well as Vinny Jackson can play. And that's what they really did so well last year when they were able to move the ball. It was a lot of deep routes for Jackson, and Glennon has that strong arm. So even though it doesn't necessarily set up for what you're going to have with McCown, it is something in the future that you want to look to because Glennon right now is there down the road at quarterback. Whether he will be in 2 or 3 years, we'll see. But for right now, if you're planning for the Bucs in 2-3 years, you have Mike Evans, you also have Vinny Jackson, and you have Glennon thrown to him. I think that's a scary combo right there.
I think Mike Evans, because same as you said, Dan, I think Sammy Watkins would be the preferred person, but if he's off, Mike Evans is the second best thing. I mean, as we said, jump ball, Mike Evans, we saw that at A&M. Jump ball, he's always going to get it. But I can also see if Tampa wanting to go defense, C.J. Mosley's also there. He's up there. I can see him going there. It really comes down to what Tampa wants. Do they want to go defense? Do they want to go wide receiver? Or somewhere else on the offensive line? But I think right now, in this situation, with my rest of my draft picks, I really think Mike Evans got to go to Tampa Bay.
Yeah, don't be surprised if they go defense. Remember, Lovie Smith, defensive guys. I mean, that's the Tampa 2.
Yep.
That is his baby right there. So if he goes defense, do not be shocked at all, although they do have needs on offense.
Okay, up next is presumably another quarterback team. It's the Minnesota Vikings. A lot of people have tied them to quarterbacks. I think that they're going to go with Teddy Bridgewater. After Blake Bortles, I think he's the most pro-ready quarterback. He's got athleticism. He's been a solid starter, I think, 2.5 years at this point. I think you can't go wrong with Teddy, but what do you guys?
I mean, I already have Manziel and Bridgewater off the board by this point, so I think if Bortles is available, which I think he probably should be, I think he's the third out of those 3 guys as far as talent goes, then yeah, the Minnesota Vikings should go Bortles. I mean, I just think that you can't really pass up on getting a guy who you think could be a franchise quarterback. So if Bortles is available for Minnesota, whichever quarterback is available, I think that's where they need to go. I mean, that's just the pick they kind of need to make right now.
Yep, I completely agree with Darius here. I think that, there's been some rumblings that the Vikings don't want to go QB in round 1, and it's very possible, but you are looking at a situation where most likely at least one of those big 3 quarterbacks is going to be there. Like Darius, I think Manziel and Bridgewater will be gone, so I think the pick there would be Bortles. I don't think Manziel's a good fit. I don't think, if you're looking at what Norv Turner does on their offense, I don't think Manziel's the right guy, but I think either Bridgewater or Bortles, if they're at 8, I think preference goes to Bridgewater. I think either one of them would make sense. Derek Carr is even a dark horse at that pick, but I think probably less likely when we're looking at a situation that at least one of those guys is going to be there. Some talk they go defense, but I just don't think, other than Khalil Mack, if by some chance he's there, I just don't think there's another guy who has that value. I mean, a C.J. Mosley makes sense, but does he have the value at number 8 to justify taking him over one of those top quarterbacks? I don't think so.
This is where my first quarterbacks are go. I think it's going to be Teddy Bridgewater. I think Minnesota, they didn't really want to go with the Manziel route. And the second best thing right now, Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, I think because the way my first 7 or 8 picks went, it was no quarterbacks going off the board. I think for Minnesota, they're almost backs to the wall. They got to do something with the quarterback. And I think if Teddy Bridgewater is there, dual threat, he can run, he can pass, take him off the board now. And if it works out to be a franchise quarterback, you win right there with the 8th pick in the draft.
Okay, up next is my team, the Buffalo Bills. This team has a few needs. They've addressed the quarterback last year, so I think you can say they won't go quarterback, although there are some people who even think they're not confident in E.J. Manuel. I think that's hogwash. I think Jake Matthews will be there at 9. He's a top pick. Very well may not be. That's just the way I have it working out. They could also go Eric Ebron, but what do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think they're going to go for quarterback. I think that in this situation, we're looking at a situation where Matthews might not be there, Robinson might not be there, Mack might not be there, and Evans might not be there. And that's not an ideal situation because any of those guys would be a perfect choice for them at 9. But I think the consolation prize is probably Eric Ebron, the tight end from North Carolina. They need a better tight end. Scott Chandler's good, but they need another guy. You want to have that 2 tight end set versatility. You're going to get that by having Eric Ebron, pairing him up with Chandler. He gives you that big target you don't currently have. Good athlete. I kind of consider him a big wide receiver because you can play him over middle, but you can also play him outside. And no matter where you put him, a guy who's 6'4", 250 and athletic, he's going to create mismatches wherever he is. You want to put as much talent around E.J. Manuel as you can, and I think that's what you accomplish if you draft Eric Ebron.
I think they may go the defensive route. I think Anthony Barr from UCLA. I think that could be a pick. It's a reach to go with the defense there, but I really believe if Mack's not there, second best thing on the board with him and Mosley, then followed by Ohio State's Ryan Shazier, I think, in that area. But I think for Anthony Barr, he's projected top 10. I think this would be a good place for him to go for Buffalo, and then Buffalo work around the defense, and they start building around that. They go to the offensive side.
You know, I think they're a team kind of like the Cleveland Browns where it's like their defense is decent. It's not, all world. It's not
Right.
Seattle, but their defense is decent enough to the point that they might want to go offense. And I think if they go with the receiver, it would have to be a Mike Evans, or if Sammy Watkins were to fall that far, then you obviously would have to take Watkins at that point. But I think Ebron is a good pick as well. I mean, you look around the league and you look at how tight ends have really dominated in the last few years. I mean, these guys are able to play inside or outside as a receiver, and Ebron does fit that mold. So I think that's probably where they would want to go, looking at somebody who could help out E.J. Manuel in the pass game.
Oh, certainly. They don't have that big receiver right now. I mean, Mike Williams, Robert Woods, and Steve Johnson, they're not small, but if you could have that 6'4" guy, because that's what they would be looking for in Evans, they could find that in Ebron, and it's better that he can block as well. Last pick we're going to do is number 10, the Detroit Lions. That's where actually I have Ebron going. They lost Brandon Pettigrew this offseason. They need that tight end. So I think that if he falls there, then they will take him.
Yeah, I think this is where, again, we're talking a lot of the same guys. If a Khalil Mack's there, if even a Greg Robinson, Jake Matthews could be considered just because the Lions like to go best player available. Certainly Sammy Watkins is a guy that they like. I think another guy, though, here is going to come into play is Clinton Dix, the safety from Alabama. This team, they need another safety. They signed James Ahedegbo, but he's not a guy you're really going to look at as a coverage kind of guy. I think you get Clinton Dix. He's a guy you can play either a free or a strong safety spot. You pair him up with Glover Quinn, and you're very solid at that position. I mean, in general, this team needs more talent in its secondary. A lot of people think a cornerback, Justin Gilbert from Oklahoma State, could be another option here. But they have a lot of corners. I think Clinton Dix would actually help them more just because you can immediately make him your center fielder on defense. He's a guy who's going to hit big as well. So I think that's probably their most likely pick. But if a guy like a Greg Robinson, a Khalil Mack, someone like that, Mike Evans, any of those guys fall, then that could be the pick as well.
I mean, I think defensively, if they do end up going defensively, they need somebody up the middle. I mean, the defensive line is pretty much set. I don't think they really need to mess with the defensive line. But when you look at the linebackers and then the safeties, that's where they kind of look like that could be the issue right now. I mean, as you said, they have a bunch of guys at corner, so maybe going corner wouldn't be the best to just add another guy to the mix. But I do think that if you look at Clinton Dix or Pryor, one of the two safeties, that could probably be a good pick. I also think, I mean, obviously if Mack is there, you would want to take Khalil Mack, but also think that they might want to think about going at Barr. I mean, although Anthony Barr, I don't think is nearly as talented as Khalil Mack, he might be a guy where you can just plug him into the defense and he can step up and be a leader. They just need a leader on the defense, whether it's a safety or inside linebacker. I think that's where they probably want to end up going.
Now, it's a teammate of High, Clinton Dix, but I'm going to go with C.J. Mosley. I think this is where he's going to go. As you said, Darius, I think that linebacker, outside linebacker position is something, if they can get that down, have the defense stack, because the offense, they already got weapons there. So with like the receiving core, I think if Mosley's still there, he's projected top 10, probably 7 on NFL.com. But I think if he's still there, Mosley, if Mack's gone, Barr's already gone off my board. I think he's now your number 1 there for the linebacker position.
Okay, well, that's going to do it for this section of the National. We're now going to move on to final stories with Darius and myself. It was recently reported that billionaire Donald Trump wanted to buy the Buffalo Bills, who will be up for sale due to the death of the Bills' owner and founder, Ralph Wilson. In an interview with the Buffalo News, Donald Trump stated that if he bought the Bills, he would want to keep them in Buffalo. While that may make some Bills fans feel better in this time of uncertainty, it doesn't have the same effect on me. First off, in order to purchase the Bills, Trump would have to divest all of his holdings in casinos, which he says he is prepared to do. Once he has done that, Trump would also have to find a few more big pockets to join him in this venture, as the estimated $900 million ticket it would take to buy the team would be a large fraction of the Donald's net worth. Lastly, we're talking about a guy who is constantly in debt and since 1991 has had 3 of his companies file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Bills fans are looking for stability and in their next owner, and in doubt, Trump does not fit that bill. Having said that, if it's between Trump or John Bon Jovi, who wants to move the team up Lake Erie to Toronto with a group of Canadian investors, or potentially an LA group, then Trump, you're hired.
Looks like this is my last national hour. It's been a ride. The show started 4 years ago when I was a freshman here at Ohio State. Started with me going up to Scarlet and Gray Sports Radio, president then, Drew Sullivan, and he said my idea for a sports show that we cover everything in addition to OSU was a good idea. He introduced me to Charlie Danis, who introduced me to Ken Johnson. From there, the 3 of us made our 3-man weave work on radio until Charlie took it to the next level, Buckeye TV. When we had the show on air, I got to work with all these amazing people here at Buckeye TV. Asia, Franz, Alex, Hayden, Jeff, Brad, Jordan, Manny, Tao, Dave, and for all the countless others I didn't mention, I apologize, but you deserve to be in there too. I thank everyone who's had a hand on the National Hour, and I really do appreciate the work that the guys have put into the show. I never thought that it would get to be this, but I love the direction that the show has gone in from where it started. I have no earthly clue what is coming next for me after working with the Clippers, #ClipShow, this summer, but I know what I'm leaving behind. The best years of my life so far. I really do. Thank you.
Thanks, Darius. Thanks for watching our draft special. Hopefully, we have helped you in this time of crisis as you figure out your draft. Probably not. There's still like 3 weeks to go, and you're probably going to change your picks like 10 more times. But anyways, once again, thanks, and we'll see you next week for our season finale of the National Hour. So come back then, and once again, thanks to Darius Thigpen.